I don't want to call myself a KD guy, but I always find myself in the position of being a KD defender. The amount of minutes that him and Booker played in these two playoff series were absurd. He played in the Clippers series, he played 44 minutes a game. In this series, he was at 42 minutes a game. Today, he will only play 37 because of the blowout. He's a 2007 draft guy. He's 34 years old, 2 injuries this year. And I think part of the problem with that trade was they gutted their team and put themselves in a position where Booker and Durant had to carry this superhuman load, which they could do for 3 weeks. But both of them, it wasn't just that Denver was so good. I just don't think that load that they had was sustainable. Both guys seemed just beat tonight, especially Durant the last 2 games. He seemed old, and he's not old. He's only 34,
Yeah, they really look like they ran into a wall. And that's, if you see one of the best shooters of all time in Kevin Durant taking all the shots he normally takes and all of them are coming up short, all of them are just a little bit off, it's not exactly rocket science why that might be the case. Yeah. And I think, look, I don't know whether he's going to get killed or not. I would hope we're better than that because this is a guy in Durant in particular, a knee injury, going into an ankle injury, going into 5 games at the end of the season with the Suns, going into logging 40 plus minutes of heavy lifting in every single playoff game. It was going to burn out at some point. And I think Devin Booker kind of papered over some of those limitations just with his incredible shot making at the first part of the series. But even that ran its course too. He's being run into the ground too. And he's a guy who is playing huge minutes while at a dead sprint, trying to get everything he can in transition, like being an incredibly active player all the time. Like his workload per minute might be as high as any other player in the postseason so far. So that was never going to last in tangible terms when your bench is what it is. Chris Paul is out. Now Ayton was out. It was just kind of a matter of time for the Suns.
Yeah. And KD, who hit the threes in the first round, the second round, he's 22% from 3. He didn't take 1 3 tonight. Yeah. And to me, that says I don't have my legs anymore, And again, it sounds like I'm making excuses for him. I'm not, because ever really since he left Golden State, you kind of make your own destiny, which he went with Kyrie. He made one of the biggest tactical errors that any great player has ever made. He believed in Kyrie and ended up having to push for a trade, partially because Kyrie pushed for a trade. He didn't want to get stuck in that Brooklyn team. Steered his way to Phoenix, and Phoenix was so desperate to get him that they gave up the farm, and it was defensible, but man, that seems like a lot now. You're talking Bridges and Cam Johnson and 4 firsts and a swap. And Cerruti and I were talking about it before you hopped on. I just don't know what the move is for this team, because they have that Ayton contract that's almost $100 million, 3 years left. They have Chris Paul, who has broken down now 2 straight playoffs and is at the age where I just don't think it's realistic to think he could be one of your best 3 guys in a playoff series. They're going to have to patch together some stuff that is going to be a lot harder with the CBA. And I don't know what the moves are. And they don't have any picks. You're in a conference with Jokic. You're in a really competitive with the Warriors and Lakers and teams that are just going to spend money. You have some up-and-comer teams with a ton of assets like New Orleans and OKC and Utah. And I don't know how the ceiling gets higher. Ishbia, when he came on my podcast, said how, this was, you do this trade to get Booker and Durant and you figure it out. And that makes sense, but I kind of find it hard to believe that they made this trade thinking that they would win 6 playoff games this season. What are your thoughts on that?
My guess is they probably were rolling the dice with this group. We're going to plug in a Terrence Ross here and there. We're going to see if we can pick up some guys between the trade deadline and the end of the season who can help us. And we'll see what we've got. We'll see how healthy KD is. I think the ankle injury threw a wrench into things a bit for them. Yeah. But really, they were going to be shallow after that deal. And honestly, they were kind of shallow before that deal. We talk about the Bridges and Johnson part because those guys look so good in Brooklyn. I don't know. The Phoenix team that they were a part of wasn't that great. It had some serious problems. The energy of that team was really off. The flow of it was not what it had been in previous seasons. They had been, elements of that team, whether you're talking about Booker or Paul or basically anyone on it, had been kind of alternating injuries all season. They didn't really have the juice either. And so I think you consolidate some of that stuff for Durant. You obviously include a lot of draft capital in that deal. And the hope is, with some mid-level additions, with some veterans who are coming on to try to, be a part of a contending team, you can cobble some things together. And I think what this series did show was those guys are elite enough shot makers that if they do have even sufficient help, they're going to have a puncher's chance against anybody, even a team as good as Denver, right? So I think they are close, but every other team in the league is going to be competing for those same resources, those same budget guys, those same really good mid-level players. Can they beat everyone else to the punch? I think is a perfectly valid question.
The Ayton piece. So my guy Eddie Johnson, and I actually ended up calling in with Termini and Eddie today because was driving around listening to them, and I was like, I get in on this. But they were talking about Phoenix, and Eddie's been a big Ayton defender. He does the games for the Suns. He's with the team, and he's just like, look, man, that's a nice kid. He's a good kid. So he's always in that camp. And today, I don't know, just reading between the lines what he was saying, but also reading between the lines of some of the stuff that's floated out and some of the behavior and, him getting pretty ornery during one of the games on the bench because he wasn't playing. And it just feels like that's heading toward an end, where I just think there's a lot of frustration. I think there has been for a while. I think they're ready to move him for Sabonis last year. And I look at that. Can you turn him into two guys, basically? Can you turn him into, a center by committee situation and get one more score? And ironically, everything goes back to, which I keep mentioning, when they didn't take Halliburton that year. If they just make that pick, all of this becomes a hell of a lot easier, although maybe he would have been in the KD deal for all we know. But they're just an asset short. Maybe they can flip him into two. I don't know. But I don't know if you're going to say, give me your top 5 West teams next year that you feel good about right now, not even know what's going to happen the next 2 rounds. I'm not positive they would be in my top 5.